Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Made from Grapes Live. My name is Liam, and joined as always by Severin, who's the other half of Made from Grapes. This week we've got two great guests for you. We've got a returning hero, Marshall. It's the only repeat guest we've ever had. Yeah,
First and
and
only.
we've got Will as well. Marshall, obviously, he's the sommelier at Ubiquitous Chip in Glasgow, and Will, he's the co-founder, co-owner, co-director.
Co-founder, co-owner,
Okay.
does everything.
Of the Berg Wines, who are based in
Cool.
Edinburgh.
Right.
So they're a wine supplier, and Will's helped us a lot when we've started up doing our pop-ups and stuff. So we're really glad to have him on. Yeah,
Pleased to
well,
be here.
okay. Everybody knows about Marshall, and if you don't know about Marshall, then you can go back a couple episodes, and he'll tell you about how he describes himself as a Chardonnay. Well,
That's right. Well remembered.
yeah.
Well remembered.
Well, how did you first get into wine? What drew you to it?
I think I'm like most people who are in the wine trade. You kind of you get into it when you're younger and you never get out. I still think I've been doing it for about 22 years now, and I still say I'm just waiting to find my real vocation and get a proper job. But it looks like it's not happening, so I'm kind of stuck with it. But I came out of university. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't have a job a degree that specified going into any kind of work. I'd worked in bars, nightclubs when I was at university and just after. And I ended up joining Majestic Wines, who back then, it was about 2000, along with Oddbins, they were probably the two main high street retailers, the two very prominent ones. And had a great time. It was a wonderful place to learn about wine, as anyone who's in that time through the 90s, early 90s came through Majestic or Oddbins. They were great companies with great portfolios, who really encouraged the staff to taste, train, learn. And I think anyone who's in the wine trade, when you get into wine, you get a bit of a bug for it. And it becomes very hard to go and do something else. You couldn't do an office job or anything like that after being in the wine trade. So after doing that, I had a couple of stints with smaller merchants in Scotland, worked with a few bigger merchants, and then was lucky enough about 7 years ago, Parker and myself managed to find some mug to lend us some money, and we managed to start our own business. So, which is fantastic because we now have the freedom to choose and sell what we want. It's not easy. It's never easy. It's not easy right now. That's for sure.
Nothing's.
But yeah, it's gone so quickly, and it's an industry that once you're in it, you would, I think you'd find it very hard to leave. Product, people, good times. So hopefully they'll be back.
Yeah. Okay, so this week we've gone by the weather outside, and we've chosen rosé wine as a topic.
Glorious sunshine.
But that's quite good because we can come to that later on. We want to talk about some of the myths around wine. So maybe one of them is that rosé wine needs to be drunk in sunshine. But yeah, Sev, why don't you tell us a little bit about the different ways that you can make rosé wine?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the direct press, you've got the skin maceration, you've got what is called the rosé de saignée or the blend. So that's really the main way of making rosé wine. But actually, when you think just quickly about history, I love my history things, and so I mean, rosé wine is actually maybe the beverage that people have been drinking from day one with wine. Of course, a million years ago, people, they were crushed the grapes. They don't care about what they had, white or pink, and the rosé was made already like that. You had to wait actually Greeks and the Romans to see the way of separated the red to the white grapes and making two different colors. But before that, it's been always pink wine. Then actually, yeah, I mean, the train was mostly in France. We all know Provence Rosé wine, and it's been there actually because the Phocéens. So it's been a little while again when they just brought their vines to Marseille area. So, and this is how they spread the vineyards then in Provence. And so since that time, so let's say 6 BC, they been drinking rosé wine and even today. So yeah,
maybe not the swimming pool wine though, for their sunning themselves by the pool.
Yeah,
it's not that kind of rosé.
Yeah, I mean, what is very interesting, obviously, actually, you know, when you're thinking about rosé, like any wine, the way people were drinking in the past and this period of time. Example, red wine, they were just undrinkable. They had to add like cinnamon and any kind of natural sweetener to be able for people to drink wines. People were drinking really more so white or pink. Pink is really again even for till let's say the 1950s. 70s when actually the image, 1970s when the image of rosé wine turned, and we can discuss maybe why between our Weizenfandel and Matthäus wine and all those brands and type of rosé
wine.
Am I
White Zinfandel? Am I White Zinfandel and Will's Matthäus? Is that it?
Definitely Matthäus, yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's important today we can talk about that. Yeah, the perception and the image that rosé wine is since that period, since the 1970s, and but there's a bit of change, I would say, for the last few years, and we're gonna discuss that with our guest, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. So as always, we're going to be drinking some wines as we're chatting. So Marshall, I'll come to you. What are you drinking this week? What have you got there?
What am I drinking? Well, I decided to I went up to see Phoebe at Valhalla's Goat, and she had an old familiar friend of mine that I have on the list at the Chip that I used at a wine club originally, probably 2 years ago. I used it at a wine club where we were talking about the impact of skin contact on wine. So, you know, we talk about, particularly with some of the stuff you do, Sev, white wines that are made the way you make a red wine. So you get those kind of that orangish flavor, you get some of that skin contact and some of that waxiness. And I couldn't do a whole wine club that was based on just orange wines because it was too expensive. I couldn't have done all that. So I decided to look at skin contact in a way that was not just making white wines the way you make red wines, but not just making red wines the way make white wines, making a white the way you would making a rosé, I guess, the way you would make a white one. So the one I've gone for is from Valencia in Spain. It's from Cellar de Roure. It's called Les Prunes, and it's called Blanc de Mandó. So it is essentially, they're calling it Blanc de Mandó. They don't even call it a rosé. They call it a white wine. So a white wine made from Mandó, which is a really deep colored native Spanish red grape. And the funny thing about this, when Sev was talking about the way you get rosé and the different kind of winemaking styles you can do to get it, the way they make this is with no skin contact at all. So it's just crush the grapes, the free run juice comes off, and it already, because of the pigments in the skins, you already get a really lovely deep pink color just from the free run juice. So there's no skin maceration, so there's no tannin. It really does. I understand why they call it a white wine, because it really does drink like a white wine. You've got this really fresh, bright, citrusy flavor. I know we always like to talk about strawberries and cherries when we talk about rosé. Those kind of really ripe. And they're there. There's some red fruit flavors there, but they're really underripe. So it's that really like the acidity hits you there and kind of makes your face go, and then like you get that little stinging in your saliva glands. But really, really refreshing, really bright. He uses Pablo Calatayud, the owner and winemaker at Cellar de Roure, is well known for taking kind of a hands-off approach. He is also very well known for amphora. So all the wines that he makes see time in clay amphora at some point or another along the way, and including
that's what I was going to mention actually. Like I forgot to mention at the very start. I've made a Google Earth map again of all the different vineyards for all our wines. So when I found your wine, Marshall, the vineyard, when I zoomed in, you can actually see some of the amphora sitting outside, just next to the vineyard. Yeah. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah. Oh, that's fine. I think the stuff that's outside is not as much in use, because from what I've figured out from my research into him since it came on the list, has been specifically for whites and rosés, but for most of his reds too, is keeping the amphora underground. Mm-hmm. So if you look at if you go to his website and look at some of the pictures, really, really beautiful area. But his kind of cellar room, I know you guys are all in wine. You've been to someone's barrel room before, where underground cellar, it's dark and there's just barrels stacked up everywhere. He's got that, but with amphora. So he's got this like underground bit where it's a lot cooler and there's amphora all around it. And this doesn't sound great. So this isn't me pitching it. This is me just describing it. It's like when you say wine tastes like petrol, you're not really trying to sell it based on it. You're just trying to get the point across as well as you can. So you're in this little room. It's lined up with amphora on the side, but since he wants them underground and temperature controlled, there's like these little step ups. And then the top of the amphora is kind of right there. So he fills it up and then the amphora goes underground. And because of how he's got it set up like that, it kind of looks like a big room full of porta potties. And like there's the little seat right there and you lift the amphora up and it's just like kind of go down and down and down. Okay. No dividers. Just straight down like
I don't know if I want to visit now.
The most appetizing. Yeah, don't tell Pablo I said that. He'd be really upset with me for saying his cellar room looks like a row of porta potties. But he does age all his wines in amphora, in clay, a very old school style of aging wine. But I have found, particularly for wines like this, they're very interesting when you age, well, reds as well, but rosés and white wines, when they're aged in amphora, you get that oxidative flavor. You let the oxygen come in because clay is porous. So the oxygen comes in, starts to break down, maybe give you some nutty flavors, maybe give you something a bit creamy, but it doesn't add any oak. So you're not getting vanilla, you're not getting buttered popcorn, you're not getting any of that stuff. Toast, you're really just getting kind of in red, it gives you more kind of neutral flavor. And that, to use a wine snob's term, I guess, or a winer's term, it's got that minerality, that kind of, it hits you up front with some nice crisp citrusy notes. And then there's this really nice mellow kind of, let's paint it up. Porta potty didn't sound good, so let's paint it up a bit more. It's got that kind of crushed seashell kind of thing going on, a little bit of a saltiness, and then finishes nice and long, kind of with your mouth watering. It's a really, really good wine, even on a overcast.
Okay, yeah.
Glasgow summer.
We'll come back to that. Will, what are you drinking?
I've got the new 29 vintage of. You see that? Is that okay? Yeah, Ingrid Groiss, Rosé from Austria. She's based up in Weinviertel, up in the northeast of Austria. 70% Pinot Noir, 30% Zweingelt. There's nothing too bonkers about how this wine's made. It is what I'd call a classically made rose. 6 hours maceration for the colour, then off into stainless steel, wild yeast ferment, kept till about February before bottling. So there's no real wackiness or naturalness to this wine, which is quite nice. So it does fall in the. It's interesting tasting it, because it was interesting when you said to me you were going to do rosé, because when you first mentioned rosé, my initial reaction was, oh, God, yeah.
Come on, say it. Say it.
That's fine, yeah.
Well, it got me thinking about our rosé portfolio and what we have in our portfolio. And rather bizarrely, it was only this year that we took on 3 rosés, which we are selling at over £12 a bottle. Before that, most of our rosés would be comfortably sub £10, and they all came from producers that we bought something else from who just happened to make a rosé on the side. And you kind of thought, well, that's actually a nice example of a rosé. I don't know, Marshall, the producer you've got there, if that is his main wine.
No,
the big thing he does.
He's known mostly for his reds.
Yeah,
really big, bold, tannic Southern Spanish reds. But
because it did get me thinking that apart from Provence, most other producers, the rosé isn't the lead wine, the wine that you go to the producer for to start with. And Ingrid Groiss is probably in the same boat. I mean, being in Austria, Grüne Veltliner and Riesling is the two main drivers, and having one vineyard which is split between Pinot Noir and Zweingel is it's not as unusual, but to make it into a rosé is a little bit unusual. Most people would make it into a red wine there. So it was interesting to try. It was interesting when we first tried it, because obviously we knew Ingrid very well from her Rieslings and her Grüne Veltliners. So when she said she had a rosé, it was almost like a surprise. We were like, oh, right, okay, great. Didn't know that. Taste-wise, it does go down the very clean, fresh. You can see on the colour of it, very salmon pink Provence style. Almost transparent, to be honest, when you look down through it, but a lovely colour to it. Very much on the soft red fruits, very much on the cherries, the strawberries. But like the wine Marcia was tasting there, the distinguishing thing with this, a lot of the soils here are quite chalky, so coming through on it is a very much that, and it's hard to use in wine terms, is that minerality, which is the word we quite often use, that seashell, that minerality, the freshness, and it does finish with it's almost verging on what Marshall said, saline, and you get this lovely, clean, fresh feel to it. One of the things that I don't like about rosés sometimes is that if they finish almost, they feel like soft and mellow, where they feel too fruity on the finish. It's nice to have the fruit on the nose and on the palate, but really, for me, you want it to be finishing bone dry and super fresh, which it does. She's certified organic. This is the first vintage she's done certified organic. Not the first vintage of the rosé, but yeah, and like you said, it's last week it would have been fantastic. This week, even though it's overcast, it's still. I think it is one of these wines that you don't need the sunshine to be shining. It'll be interesting later, maybe trying it with food just to see how it matches up. But it's the kind of thing that, you know, I quite like rosé with spicy food, with Indian foods. You know, it's not it really isn't just a summer aperitif wine. I think it's got a bit more to it.
So we were talking about this. Sorry.
Does it any?
Go, Marshall, yeah.
Sorry, does it have any kind of black pepper? Is there any spice on it at all? It's one of the things I've always loved.
Because Svelgt brings the spiciness usually.
I've had this in the fridge all day, and I just opened it, and it's been sitting here, and as it's warming up, the spice notes are coming through on it. So now as you go back to it, it's got a herbiness to it. There's a white pepper note coming through on it, which is really nice. But I think it's, again, rosé wine, like a lot of good white wines, you know, obviously when it's bone cold, you're not getting the most out of it. And, you know, just to let it warm up a little bit, I think you're going to get more from it.
Yeah, Seth, we were chatting earlier, we were talking about like how people's tastes are maybe changing and like what they're eating. And so then that could be a driver actually for maybe people branching out and choosing rosé to pair with stuff. We were talking about how maybe people are kind of veering a wee bit away from meat sometimes. Rosés are ideal for this.
Yeah, I mean, just about rosé wine and food pairing. Just myself, I was very surprised when I moved in Glasgow and see on the wine list to have one reference as a rosé.
It's normally two. It's normally a dry one and a sweet one.
Yes, but do you remember? we talk on. Do you remember when at the Gannett? I was like, but the problem is there is one that sells, but the other stays on the side, and obviously it's a tricky thing. But then, Marshall, you said that you have some sort of numbers in your list. But I remember when I was working, I set up the Buddha Bar on Icebridge, you know, and obviously so Asian food here, so Japanese, South Asian restaurants, spicy food, and I had like maybe 15 to 20 different type of rosé wine with all the different palette of colors. And that's the thing. What is beautiful for me about rosé is the versatility again of this type of wine. I think again people maybe were just thinking about the way the color of the rosé should look like, and actually there is much more than just the salmon color, or pale rosé typical from Provence. By example, we was talking to Liam about that. I remember when I was younger, working in a wine shop in Paris, and my type of wine, rosé wine, was more like a claret style from Bordeaux, or the rosé from Collioure. And those ones, there's a long maceration, dark color, and they're really foodie wines. But then after you realize that actually France, and that's why maybe I've got a little bit of my heart goes a bit into rosé wine, which I actually surprised myself. Is actually, yeah, it's true. Actually, France is number one in the world to make rosé. And then I realized that it's true. Okay, well, we all know Provence wine in rosé, about their rosé, and we can talk about that later. But think about actually, so Collioure is the farther south of France. And so claret is the type of rosé you found in Bordeaux. Then you've got the Cabernet d'Anjou in Loire-Vallée. Then you've got your Pinot Noir in Alsace, where they're making rosé. And you have also the rosé from Mandó in Jura, something quite exceptional. You've got Bandol rosé. You've got Palette AOC, which is just next to Aix-en-Provence. I don't know if you tried that. Château Simone is the goddess of rosé wine. So yeah, there's really a diversity of rosé wine in France, and it's not only Provence, I'm telling you. Yeah.
I think over here we don't really see that.
Yeah,
sure. I think in my whole time with rosé, the dark coloured rosés have just been a no-no. Regardless of how good they are, selling them is a very, very hard thing to do. They're instantly judged on the colour. And as soon as customers see the colour, they think, "Oh no, I'm not going to like that. It's not going to work for me." So it's a very small market. But the hardest thing with rosé, unlike the other two main groups, red wine and white wine, is that when you say to people, when they talk about red or white, they immediately then start talking about certain countries, regions, or grape varieties. And if a customer says, I really like Sauvignon Blanc, or I really like wines from the south of France, they're talking about areas and grapes. When they talk about rosé, Provence is probably the only region that I really hear when people drill it down. Rosé is rosé, and what it's made from and where it's from is not really a massive part of that. I think the kind of white Zinfandel market takes care of itself, and the Provence is the thing that people identify with and ask for. Maybe it's the only thing they know about rosé. Maybe it's the obvious choice, the premium choice, perhaps. But if somebody started talking about Spanish rosé and you mentioned Navarra or Rioja or the grape varieties involved, Garnacha or Tempranillo, it's it just never goes to the depth of not just knowledge, but the depth of wanting to know. Because if it's pink, then
that's it.
That's it.
We'll come on to that in a little bit about the myths, because I think that the colour, there's like stuff tied up in the colour. But Seth, actually, can I come back to you quickly? What are you drinking? Can you tell us, please?
Oh, yeah. So, okay, but guys, this boy already. I've been talking to Sylvain Martinez already a few times in the show. So, Sylvain Martinez from Loire-Vallée.
That looks dark.
That's the color. Okay, so it's a pet nut. So, from Sylvain Martinez, and that is pink, as you can tell. Okay, so it's 50% Gros Lot. Okay, so Gros Lot is the grape you use to make Cabernet d'Anjou. So usually it's quite that sweet type wine. Usually you find with this grape 25% of Pinot d'Aunis, okay, and 25% of Gamay. So here direct press, okay, so free range juice, and you've got spontaneous, so fermentation, the spontaneity for fermentation. You've got native yeast, and it's been disgorged here But again, it's been unfiltered, so I don't know if you can see there's a bit of a deposit there, but I don't know if you can see that. Anyway, can you see that? No. But I mean, it's really kind of an intense note of like peppery and sweet berries. It's really drinking well, and I mean, it's a natural sparkling wine. It's definitely not lacking champagne. And example, the one of the things you can find in champagne, I'm sure when we're talking about the method saignée, that is something that you see sometimes in champagne, but here obviously it's just a red grape juice here, and it's a proper wine. We were talking about that earlier with Liam, and it's like anything about rosé or like champagne. If the quality of the juice is not there, then your champagne or sparkling wine or your rosé will be bad also. If you have the quality of the grape and then the quality of the juice, then your wine, whatever is the color, whatever if it's a still or a sparkling, it should be delicious. So yeah. But so this is quite rich. You can tell, as you can see, the color is quite rich on the note. As I said about the aromas, it reminds me sometimes about the Cœur Royal, but on the light. So you got that black currant note very much there, and with the kind of peppery quite floral. And what is great with the sparkling wine also is definitely an aperitif, but you can see for food, for a proper like a dinner or lunch, vegetarian, but definitely seafood, etc. So yeah,
Cool.
Lovely wine.
Okay, I'll quickly introduce my wine and then we'll get on to some myths. So I don't normally choose one of Severine's wines. We normally
It's the first
we
time
normally try
actually.
and mix up so it's not too hard on our sales pitch. But Severine let me taste this a few months ago when Jan-Philipp, the winemaker, had sent over some bottles to taste, and I couldn't wait until it came back in again. So I wanted to show this. It's called José Stronaut.
Oh, yeah.
And it's by a guy called Jan-Philipp Bleeke, and he's in the Mosel in Germany. So it's Pinot Noir, and it's quite handy because he's got all the winemaking on the back of the bottle. So I'll just read it. 50% of the grapes are macerated for 24 hours, and then all the grapes are gently pressed, and it's fermented spontaneously, and yeah, it's like nothing added, nothing taken away, kind of natural style. But what I really like about the label on the back as well is that he lists his crew members. So
Yep.
he tells you like everyone's name there. Like so, there's a guy from Belgium, someone from Peru, someone from USA. So it's like a kind of international cast. But it's not often that like all the people that work together all get a shout out. So I thought that was quite nice. But the wine itself, so it's Pinot Noir. I don't know if you can see the color. It's slightly cloudy, but it's a nice kind of peachy color. And on the nose it's kind of slightly tropical. You got like peach, some kind of tropical fruit, like maybe a little bit of guava, pineapple type of thing. And then on like when you taste it, it's got that kind of ripe citrus acidity, so kind of grapefruity. You get a kind of a little bit of kind of sweetness. It goes up, and then it kind of just mellows out again, and then it leaves you with a slight bitterness. Really, really tasty. And it's 10.5%, so you could probably do a bottle by yourself.
That's quite handy.
I was gonna ask you guys that too. What's the alcohol percentage on the wines you've got?
12.5.
But just out of curiosity.
12.5.
12.5 as well, yeah.
12.5. Okay, mine's 11.5 too. But I think that was something to kind of comment on with regards to rosé, is that quite frequently you find rosé at the lower end of the spectrum and the alcohol level too. And maybe that's part of the whole drinking it outside when it's sunny, so you can drink a little bit more without it going to your head quite as fast because you are sitting out in the sun and you're drinking it cold and fast.
Or have a Magnum.
Yeah, or if you're going to go for a Magnum or a Jeroboam or something.
It could be
I have noticed a lot lot of times when you see rosés, they tend to be a little bit lower in alcohol, and we talked about the color already. But the other one I was almost going to get when I went to pick this out at Valhalla's, I almost got swayed into something else, and it was only because the alcohol, and it was 14%. And I thought, a 14% rosé, I gotta see what that's like.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
I mean,
I was
the
smart.
other thing as well is it could be that they're actually picking the grapes a little bit earlier to try and keep some of the acidity, because well, especially if it's like south of France, it can get like super hot there. So that maybe that's another reason to try and kind of to limit it that way.
Yeah, definitely. You want to keep the acidity, so you harvest earlier most times. With mine here, the Blanc de Mandó is harvested before the white grapes are, in order to keep the acidity ripe and fresh on it, and to keep the color probably a little bit down too. So yeah, absolutely.
But the Rosé de Saignée example, I come back to that, is the other where actually the grapes, they are full maturity, and that's actually making like a red wine, and they just maybe some people they don't know about, just like saigner means bleeding, so you bleeding the vine, so bleeding the grape, so making like a red wine, and then they keep the bled juice on the side and keep it that juice and fermented that juice and make it a rosé. But the main thing is that the grapes are picked at full maturity, as you should make a red wine. So yeah,
But
that's interesting.
I feel like a lot of times when people use saunier, they're doing it to boost their red wine. And it's almost that they make a rosé as kind of a byproduct.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
And the first one I came across when I started working here at the Chip, well, first time in the UK, was a rosé made from Malbec. And
the rosé from Malbec. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, with how much Glasgow loves Malbec, if I've got a rosé Malbec, it's going to sell through the roof, and it did. But it's really hard to find, because I've asked the wine. I won't say which wine this was, because when I first had it, I knew for a fact that they made it doing the saunier method because they wanted to supercharge their Malbecs. But when a few years down the line, when I met a representative from the winery at a tasting, he denied it. He said, "No, we're not doing that now. Maybe they did that before I got there, but as far as I know now, no, we make the rosé to be a rosé." And it does kind of, I mean, I wonder how many people you could get to admit that that's the process that they use, because it seems almost like you're going to have to downplay your rosé to say, we use this method to make our red wine great, and then here, try this rosé too.
Yeah.
You know?
But it's funny what you said, because, for example, so I said to you about champagne is, for me, what I always know about champagne, you have two methods, the blend or the Rosé de Saignée. And the people who make the Rosé de Saignée, like Bollinger or Lamandé Bernier or Duval-Leroy, they're so proud, and they think that this is the best champagne rosé on the planet. In Champagne. Yes,
on the planet too, yeah.
On the planet, there is no other way to make a pink champagne. And obviously, the blended guys, like the others, like Ruinart, is proper blending, so red and white blended together. But usually they use, when they do the blend, it's 5% of red wine to blend.
Yeah. So, I've definitely experienced that in Champagne, where if it's not the Saunier method, the winemaker or the representative will be very cagey about, they don't. It's like a politician; they would never answer the question directly, and I've never understood why, because it's still a quality way of doing it.
Big fight.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, if you wanted in the house, you could do a simple rosé if you really wanted to. It's
But at the same time, when's the last time? Well, Sev can maybe answer differently, but at least us. When's the last time you saw Bollinger touting their reds? It's not like they're not making the rosé. They're not using the Saunier method to make a better red. They're doing it to make the best.
But you've got in Champagne, you've got the wine that's called Bouzy. And I'm sure that this wine will be today. I mean, that's something we discussed also with Liam. That we're gonna discuss now. I think the way the rosé wine now is coming back is maybe that color is not as a salmon anymore because people drinking lighter red wine. So people actually, they appreciate darker rosé. But anyway, but in Bouzy, this is the red wine from Champagne, and it's like pure juice, glue type wine, but with a bit of tannins. I had the opportunity to taste that before, but it's really rare, and now it's over the roof for the price. It's just crazy. But yeah. But they're making red wine that they keep for themselves.
I was going to say, what's the export like on that?
Yeah. There is no export for that.
Okay, shall we get into some myths? Right, we'll go from that one because that's not bad. Okay, first up on the myths: darker equals sweeter or higher in alcohol. Marshall, is that true?
No, it's not. It's not true at all. Obviously, it's not true. But like, it's all about, as Seb was saying earlier. It's really interesting. I guess I was trying to think about this when we were talking about it the other day. But how many other styles of wine does someone describe to you what they want based on the color of it? Like it's not very common, and I guess you kind of get it with Pinot Noir or sometimes with reds. You might describe you want a really light or pale red, and I've talked myself into it too with whites. If you want something that's got some oak, you might say you want kind of a rich golden color white, but most people don't really do that, and that is the only way people seem to talk about rosé, is that they want the color. They want pale. They want it to look almost like a white wine that had something red behind it off in the distance, that you just kind of caught a glint of red behind the glass, you know?
But it's almost like that pale color is
obviously
a quality color.
Yeah.
You know, so the pale color has become if it's not a pale pink, then it's not a quality wine because Provence is pale. So it's
and
got
they're
to
the
be
best,
pale.
right?
Yeah.
And they're the best,
Well, that's
right?
the thing, yeah. So, yeah, let's do that as a myth. Is Provence the best?
No.
Well, wait, no, I'm not done talking about color. Hold on.
Okay, go.
It's a pet peeve of mine because when I first, well, I think as a lot of wine drinkers will maybe not openly admit, but if they search their souls deeply, they'll admit. I know Will's already admitted to this too. One of the first wines that got us all into wine was something a little sweet, and it was probably a little pale. And
but I admitted that to you, not to the whole of YouTube.
Well, I just grasped you out to the world now, Will. So you're in the same ballpark with me. The first wine that I remember enjoying, or what grape-based product that I remember enjoying, was a steal in a glass of my mom's white Zinfandel when I was a kid. You know, it was sweet, it's fruity, it's fairly low in alcohol. It was an accident when they made it the first time, but people really like it. So, you know, that it has its place in society. There's a lot of people who do like sweet. Kind of those lighter, sweeter styles are used to usher people into the rest of the world of wine. But nowadays, when I first moved here, the first kind of deeper colored rosé I had living in the UK was Claret from Bordeaux. And I had never heard, as an American, I'd never heard the term that mostly English folk use, but for Bordeaux wine in general is claret. And in the States, we don't say that. I'd never heard that before. So when I saw it on a label, it was spelled a little differently, and my French is horrible, Sav, you know. So I was like, do you pronounce it? Is it claret? Is it claret? So I was kind of taken aback by it because it is this. I mean, you could almost classify it as a really pale red wine. That's how deep color we're talking about for a rosé. And then you go look into it and find out that that's the way, you know, all Bordeaux wine used to be way back when. These really deep colored reds are kind of a newer thing in terms of wine history, like Seb was saying earlier. But to me, that's what I wanted. The deeper color to me usually meant it was going to be a little bit more like a red wine. So it meant you'd get some tannin, you'd probably get more fruit, but it wasn't necessarily sweet fruit. It was just more flavor. And at the time, as a self-described red wine drinker, I would say the darker the rosé, probably the better I was going to enjoy it. Not thinking it would be sweet, and in fact, the opposite. Because if it's darker, that usually meant, in my mind at least, that there's probably more skin contact, which meant more tannin, which meant your mouth felt like it was drying out a little bit more. So it gives you the perception of something a little bit kind of drier. And on that same thing, if you say really pale is going to be really dry, most white Zinfandel is pretty pale. This whole blush thing that people talk about all the time. It's quite pale, but quite frequently has a lot of sugar on it. So I think there's something in there about judging a book by its cover, but I'm not clever enough to put that together. So I'll leave it to you guys.
So okay, well, we'll come back to you with the myth. Is Provence the best rosé, or is it just the marketing? Maybe talk a bit about the marketing.
I think it's a mixture of many things. I mean, the one thing that I would say about Provence as a region and a style of rosé wine is that they have been extremely successful as a group marketing body to put Provence rosé right at the forefront of quality rosé wine. And if you look at other areas that have done it, Champagne's done it very successfully, Bordeaux's done it very successfully, where there is times where they get together and they work as a whole region to promote the area and to promote an area of quality, where people now see Provence as a premium product and one that justifies its price tag. And we were talking about some the other day, and how do we look today? You're talking Provence rosé anywhere between retail £15 and £25 up to premium things like Domaine Haute, which I believe is probably over £30 now. That's a lot of money for a style of wine, which many of us might kind of say is either A, a byproduct, or B, never going to reach the complexity of a white wine or a red wine in that same price category. But Champagne is probably the classic region. Not to dismiss Provence rosé. I wouldn't say it's the ones that I try. There's nothing wrong with them. The quality's there. But there's always a feeling, like with Champagne, you're paying a little bit extra for the brand and the marketing and the celebrity endorsement, the Instagram Saint-Tropez photos. I mean, I was looking at Miraval's webpage today, and I was struck by it for a couple of reasons. The first was it reminded me of when you need to complain to a company like Virgin Media or British Gas, and you go onto their website to find their phone number. And the first thing it says is, "We're here to help you. We're here to help you." And you go, "Okay, click for help. We really want to help you. What's your problem?" And you're like, "Why won't you give me a phone number? Why won't you? I just want a phone number to call." And you go round all the web pages and you can't find what you want. And their web page was like that. It had all this lovely branding and image and all these words, it was like a Christmas perfume advert. It's got all these lovely romantic images but it didn't tell me. I had to really look to see A, what the grape variety was, B, where they actually are. It was the basic information wasn't quite there. So, but I wouldn't knock that, because if they can successfully sell their wines at those premium prices, then fantastic. And Miraval I've not had for a wee while, but the Provence roses that I have had are good. But the one thing that I'd always say about Provence rose is, if you go, there's other regions in the world, especially along as you go into the Rhone Valley, into Languedoc-Roussillon, into parts of Spain, that are producing roses of similar quality at cheaper prices. And I think the whole premium thing works. Like, for example, in Burgundy, premium products work. If you're a lover of Pinot Noir and you've got the money to buy top quality Pinot Noir, there's not many other places in the world that can produce something that can reach the heights of. I mean, that's a very big debate, but if you are a real Burgundy lover, if you went down and you bought Californian Pinot Noir or maybe New Zealand Pinot Noir, you wouldn't quite get what you want, and so you'd be willing to pay more for it. I don't get that with Provence. I could quite happily buy Languedoc-Roussillon rosé or Austrian rosé and get as much pleasure and quality out of them. So the idea of it to be a premium region, yes, if you want to look good when you drink your rosé, then that's fine. But I think you can go elsewhere and get just as good quality for a better price. And it was interesting you saying there about the different styles of rosé. I mean, the one interesting thing that we found this year, and I think I said to you before, every year we look at Provence rosé, and I've tasted a lot of Provence rosé, and every time I feel like it is overpriced. And this year we brought in Austrian rosé. We actually brought in a Bordeaux rosé, which interestingly is not done in a long maceration style. It's in a light Provence style, but it's Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot, and it tastes a lot more red fruit style. We brought in a premium Syrah rosé from the Languedoc-Roussillon, from our very good friends at Bruno Andre down there. It was the first time he had done it, and it comes in this big uh, horribly tacky bottle. I mean, really just unnecessarily tacky. And it looks like it's a Magnum, even though it's a normal bottle.
Oh, really?
And we shipped it. We dilly-dallied about how much to buy of it, and it came in 2.5 weeks ago, and we sold out of it completely. So that there is a market for people who want to spend a little bit more on rosé, and I think going back to what Marcia was saying before about the color of the wine and the food, I think with red wine, a lot of customers now are moving away from big oaked, rich, high alcohol reds and coming down onto lighter style grapes, whether it's Gamay, some styles of Cabernet Franc, Loire reds, etc. And I think rosé, it should meet somewhere in the middle where there is an opportunity for good winemakers to make very good quality rosés that have the light freshness of a white wine but have the more developed complex fruit characteristic of a red, which I think I don't think Provence will do that. I think Provence will just carry on putting diamonds on the bottles, and
that's part of it. Yeah.
What you just said. What you just said is right about Provence. I mean, they've been making those, salmon color in a rosé. When, as we said about Bordeaux, that they were like a dark color. Rhône Valley is well known to make dark color. So I was said about Collioure, about Bordeaux, etc. But then those guys, they realized, my God, those guys in Provence, they are like a rocket. They are making money. They sell all over the world. Let's do the same. And then there was those guys. And then the other countries, they thought, okay, but let's do the same. Let's do the clear color. So it's been like this for like 30 years, more 40 years. And but then you can tell now it's changing. But the rosé in Provence, they should stay as they do. But did you know that it's the only place you have a cru classé in Provence since 1955. But this is just marketing, just to be clear with you guys. As you said, it's a strong lobby in each wine regions of France. And when they see something, then they can promote.
I think it's very successful. I think the other thing about it as a region as well, it's the one region that, I mean, if you're in Bordeaux and you're growing Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot and your main production is rosé, you're absolutely mad, because you'll be like, if it's red, you probably get a little bit more for it. Provence is the one region, I might be wrong, I don't know, but it's the one region that leads with rosé.
Oh, yeah.
And the funny thing about Provence, a lot of the Provence whites and reds that I try are fantastic, but it's not a region that's really associated with.
But they
it's just the marketing. But
think about
there's the marketing as well, but then there's also like the color in the color in the glass is just an attractive thing to look at, especially in the sunshine. Like so, and immediately when you see a glass of rosé, you immediately think about being on holiday or think about the Mediterranean and
L'amour.
Yeah.
Côte d'Azur.
So
I
don't think
I think it's one of the tricks of being it's one of the tricks about being a wine merchant is that you could go into as much detail about the wines that we're drinking tonight, for the grape varieties, the production methods, the vinification, the viticulture, etc., etc., etc. But at the end of the day, if the customer wants to drink something that's just the colour to suit the sun outside, that is absolutely fine. And as a merchant, you maybe have to supply that. Which is.
Sorry, Marshall, I think I cut you off here. When you go.
That's all right, because it was great conversation, and it's really funny to see how worked up talking about rosé gets us all too. I really like this energy behind talking about rosé. But if you think about where Provence is and some of the closer cities to it, there's a lot of money in and around Provence. So there's a lot of money to go into lobbying for getting Grand Cru Classé or Premier Cru Classé or something like that. But there's also a lot of money that looks at marketing only as why to sell the bottle. So, Will, you were talking about putting diamonds on your bottle and not changing what's in it. And I've got a question too. Will you guys hold your bottles up real quick? Because I'm willing to bet they're all clear glass, aren't they?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, clear glass, because you got to see what that rosé looks like, It would be crazy to put rosé in a darker colored bottle because you're selling it.
Yours is not white. Yours
No,
is a
mine's
green.
not.
It's a green color thing.
Yeah, mine's green color because you got to keep the UV out to protect. It's the same reason you'd put whites and greens and stuff. And they don't care so much about seeing it. But I think with rosé, it is so much about what the color looks like and the whole image of the wine itself that we used to say, a former colleague of mine, when we would look to buy wines, if it looked, and Moet Hennessy gets in trouble for this a lot, but if the wine looks like they spent more money on the packaging than on the product, than on the actual juice that's inside, that's kind of a turnoff for me. That means you spent more creating this. Think about some of the rosé bottles you've seen when you're on holiday. I think Gerard Bertrand has the like rose like actually in the glass on the top of the bottle or on the crest of the bottle, and there's like all this intricate design that goes into the bottle to then get filled up with this, sometimes not the best kind of liquid, and it's a shame, but it's I guess it has its market, and then maybe I'm not it for those ones that are putting more money on the bottle than maybe what's in it. But there are people that judge what they're going to buy based on what the bottle looks like. When I worked retail, there was a load of folk that quite openly admitted, look, I don't know anything about wine. I don't really know what I like yet. So quite frequently, I'll just pick based on what looks good. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're willing to take the gamble on what you end up with.
Another way that I think we've talked about it before, but how it's kind of similar as a region to Champagne, whereas they don't just market the wine itself, they market the lifestyle around the wine, and then they make that the aspirational part. So we talk about like there's a lot of money there and stuff. Like I'm sure that they give out loads of free bottles to rich people on Instagram to go and take pictures on their boats and this kind of thing.
You said the word Instagram. We talk about that, and that's going to be interesting actually to see with the I call it the younger generation of wine drinkers. There's one side, the people so going on the beach like Saint-Tropez or Cannes or whatever beaches, and they have those pale rosé with the massive brand, and they take the picture of the self. It's on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, and spread the word. Or you have the other generation, young people, drinkers, also winemakers, that they're more interested to do something like a proper wine, farmer, natural wine. And this is where you see the different colors. So in the rosé, you can tell there's two different worlds: the pale style on the beach with the brand Instagram, and the ones a bit more rustic, farm back to the source, and darker color. But that can be some sort of not generation, but fight about same generation, but with a different perspective of what should be, which way we should take drinking our rosé. You know what I mean?
Sorry.
I think that's going to be that's going to be a problem for wine in the future. Well, it's a problem just now, I guess, in that most winemakers want to make quality product, and the look of the bottle and the brand is not the main guiding focus for them, and you can see that in Burgundy and Bordeaux, the two most traditional regions, where the labelling of the bottles have stayed pretty much the same. But younger generations, if you look at what craft beer's done with the way they market things, the way natural wine brands and markets a lot of their things, that's appealing to a very, very different generation. And I think the wine trade is always accused of being old-fashioned and behind the times, and I've never quite bought that. I've always thought the focus in the wine trade has been about a quality product, and if the product's right, I'll be quite honest, if it just said the producer's name on the front of the label and the vintage, that's what most real wine lovers are after. But that doesn't work for the younger Instagram generation. That's not going to cut it. So there's going to have to be a
I've got a question here from Lauren about Instagram, but it's not really about Instagram. It's about Instagram's favourite rosé, Whisper and Angel, friend or foe.
Yeah.
Do we like it? Do we not like it?
Yeah.
Marshall?
I haven't tried it.
I don't think I've had it. I don't think I've tried it.
I haven't tried either, but I can tell. No. I mean, it's like it's what, 25 pounds. You had it?
It was okay. Yeah.
Is it 25 pounds?
Yeah. I think it's 25 pounds. The bottle.
I can guarantee you, I've never had it. That you would never catch me buying 25.
I think we got it in. Not
trade price on the shop. I mean,
I don't
not
think it was £25 with me.
in a shop. Retail
We got it
retail
in
price.
Majestic, I think. At
Retail
one point it
price.
was like 18 or 19. But it was like, but we bought it because it was like, right,
Okay, yeah.
here's
Well,
that wine.
they bought it a massive
Let's try it. Let's see what it's all about.
And was it good?
Fine.
Did you
It was
enjoy it?
okay. It was okay. I mean, like, it wasn't the most interesting one I had. It was like, it was quite well made. It was nice, but yeah, don't really get the hype. But yeah, then again, it might just be not that. It might be it's just not for me. Like, that's targeted at a different person.
That's what we were just saying. I think it's definitely your pair brand behind it. Okay, the wine maybe is definitely not bad. It's like the wines from Angelina Jolie or Drew Barrymore or anyone who try to make rosé wine. Definitely, sure, it's not a bad wine, but you definitely pay the brand behind it.
I think that's the definition of a luxury product. It's fine, but you pay a massive premium for it to have that. To have that brand.
Okay, another.
And I think for a lot of us, when we would have gone to buy Whispering Angel and you'd have seen the price tag on it, you would have immediately made, okay, if it's going to cost this much, I'm expecting to get this out of it, and your expectations start to go up and up and up. Whereas, if you just really like Rosé and you've heard great things about Whispering Angel, you might have been absolutely pleased with your purchase and thought it was great. When I was looking for wine, I went to Good Spirits Company, and that was one of the rosés they carried. And I asked if they sold any, and she said we can't keep it in stock. We sell out of it as fast as we get it in.
Yeah. You see.
I would have crossed the aisle to the Bordeaux section, I think.
Okay, I've got another myth that rosé can only be drunk as an aperitif. So maybe this is better going towards the sommeliers. What rosés might be a bit more interesting with food rather than just as an aperitif?
I mean, go ahead, Marshall.
Well, I mean, we talked about this the other day, Sev, too, and it's that rosé, one of the great travesties of rosé perception is that people do think it's just an aperitif. They don't see it as a food wine, when in reality, it probably has more versatility than any other style of wine you can come across. There's so many times in the restaurant that the chef has created this amazing dish with all these really complicated flavor pairings and these really contrasting styles. And if you go red, you're going to lose something here. And if you go white, you're not going to build up to this. And rosé quite frequently can be a great way to kind of just cut through the middle, give you a little bit here, give you a little bit here, and kind of help bring it all together. But it's my feeling that a lot of times, because of the perception people have for rosé as maybe not being that high quality, that if you were to do a tasting menu and you were to do a course with a rosé pairing on your tasting menu, a lot of people would feel like you only put that in to save money. Like you didn't put enough thought into the pairing. They think they're getting, they're not getting their money's worth for it. When in fact, I find it is one of the most versatile wine pairing options in a sommelier's arsenal. Unfortunately, you always have to bow to what the customer actually wants. And a lot of times they don't want rosé.
But it's true that at the same time, when we just discussed the fact that people they want the Perle rosé or the Provence rosé because they think this is the best quality rosé. You don't look at as you said in the UK we don't have those rosé that they looks like almost red wine because of the that long maceration, but at the same time, they, as you said, Marshall, they can be so different, all of them. It can have that dark color, red currant color, but kind of on a sweet note on texture, and can be very with a lot of tannins. So you can definitely, for example, so I was said to you regarding a Mandó Rosé. If one day you have that, think about like a duck breast salad with pickled cherry. I mean, that is a killer. I'm telling you, it's just amazing. But there's so much to go with it. It's definitely goes very well with with meat, with fish, with a starter, or just an aperitif, and this color. Let's say.
Yeah, I mean,
well, Sev, I don't know if you subscribe to the whole theory of kind of when you're pairing wines, the sort of flow of a meal, and that you can't jump back and forth between red and white if you're pairing, say, a 5-course meal. You need to kind of flow in your colors a sort of way. It's kind of a thing that sommeliers argue about a lot sometimes. Whether you can jump from white to red and then back to white again, but when you have a menu that's set up to be, like you said, maybe duck breast on a salad, and maybe that's one of the first courses, and maybe there's a fish course after it, or maybe maybe you've got a really meaty fish, but then you've got something else really light after that. Rosé can be a great bridge into kind of transitioning from white into red as far as a pairing menu goes.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back slightly as well, like I've got another thing that I wanted to mention, but I can maybe come to Will with it. Maybe a little bit of a reason why it's kind of a vicious circle with rosé and people finding it maybe doesn't have much complexity, is because suppliers are actually pushing the winemakers to get it out early, whereas like there's some. On you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality of most rosé that's on the market is it's the young 19 vintages that will be coming into the market now or on the market now, and most merchants will turn around and tell you that by the end of the year they really want to have a shot of it and not carry it over into the following year. There is a great myth that rosé just doesn't age, and I did try a rosé from a Bandol producer whose name completely escapes me, and he purposely made a non-vintage rosé, for the simple reason that he believed his rosé tasted better 2 to 3 years down the line, but customers didn't want it if it wasn't the newest vintage. So he got round that by just making blending a non-vintage style together, and it was good quality. It was expensive, but it was good quality. But the idea that I think the idea that it's a cheap wine and the idea that it has to be drunk as young as possible will get broken as better producers start making a rosé. I think if you're drinking rosés, most rosés were designed to be drunk through the summer of the following vintage and then done, dusted. You're not going to age it, but it would be interesting. I mean, I don't know. I never got Marshall's vintage. I don't know if his has got a bit of bottle age on it, but it'll be interesting. 2018. So yeah. So I think that, I mean, we have had in stock rosés that have been, I mean, the good example you'll know, Sev, is Domaine Lance and Cole's rosé, which is a relatively inexpensive rosé, but for a period, we were about a vintage behind. And the stuff was amazing. It was very, very good quality. It maybe loses a bit of its very vibrant freshness, but it's made up for by the character. I wouldn't say I've had a rosé, especially like a Provence rosé. And I don't think you would develop anything in it that is going to be.
That's not for this.
Yeah, that it would be worth leaving it. It's not. It's not. It's going to go off. But I don't think you'd get any benefit from leaving it any great period of time.
I think some of the younger winemakers.
And can I just say?
On you go.
Sorry, Liam. Can I just say, because Will said it, I meant to say this earlier too, but the way people talk about Provence rosé with such reverence as it's the top of the style is really the way they should be talking about Bandol, because the best rosés I have ever had have come out of Bandol, and they can be so difficult to find. You can get barrel aged rosé, just some really, really interesting things that come out of there, but you don't see them very often. You never really hear about them. Everything's about Provence in the style, and
the price is
really they should be talking about Bandol that way.
Yeah, the price is toppy.
It's a top price. Yeah. I mean, those wines.
Top wine.
Yes, it's true. Yeah,
well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because it's. I mean, I've had Tempier's rosé, and it's maybe one of the wines that does actually justify the price. You kind of when you taste it, you kind of think, well, hold on a minute. Yeah, it's expensive, but I don't feel.
Yeah, like
you wouldn't get that anywhere else.
Like a Domaine de l'Olivette is top producer in Bandol, as I told you. So Domaine Chateau Simon. So actually, the wine, when it aged so well. That's the thing. Why you pay a price? Because this wine, and we know that, aged, it can pass time. So you pay a certain price, and then you can maybe drink it in 5, 10. I mean, that's for the red, 15, 20, more and that. But those type of rosé wine, they're definitely there also to be drunk in the next 5 years minimum. And obviously, because it's been aged in barrel, It's going to bring, obviously, tannins. It's going to help the wine to age even better. And you can tell when the wines are getting older, you've got almost like a tuile, tawny almost color. But it brings a different aroma profile, the last, the tertiary. So it's more like mushroomy, and even it's a rosé. It's definitely food wines. It's not for just like way on the beach, of course, but it's a different aspect of rosé. But this is a rosé wine.
Yeah.
I was trying to imagine you behaving like that on the beach, Séverine. That wouldn't happen.
But I think that's the thing that we probably come back to every wine we talk about. It's just about the context that you drink it in. So sometimes you're looking for something just light and easy, nothing complex. But then there's other times you're like looking for something with a bit more. That's what I was going to say before. Is I actually think that a lot of the kind of younger winemakers now are using rosé as a style that they can maybe experiment with. Like what you were saying, well, it might not be their top cuvee, it might not be like their main one, but they're using it to like try out like working with amphora or working with different aging vessels and stuff. So I think there's actually some really interesting rosés about right now from smaller producers, where it's like.
And there's the demand's there now as well. The customers are buying it.
And actually, the wine you're drinking, Liam, Jan actually wanted to make a red wine. Okay. And it turned into rosé.
Is this guy any good?
It's a mistake.
That's the story. He wanted to make a Pinot Noir red. And he thought, wow, it's working very well. We're going to stop here. Let's make a rosé. But that was not his initial idea.
It works. It's good.
That sounds like White Zinfandel. That's the story behind White Zinfandel too. Okay, Liam, do I have time to ask a quick question, or are we out of time?
Yeah, go for it. We're a wee bit over, but go for it.
Okay, I've got a question for you guys, because I don't know if this is a cultural thing coming from the States or if it's a time thing that the name of it has changed in the last 15 years. But what does blush mean?
Blush.
Is the blush rosé?
Yeah. What, like, as far as blush rosé, what does that mean? Does it mean anything with regards to color or sweetness or
I would say
province
I would say
or
color? Like, yeah, it's kind of a little bit like that color.
A lighter color is like the White Zinfandel style, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No?
Well, dang. I thought this was going to be much more divisive then, because every time in this country I've been asked for blush. Where I grew up, blush meant White Zinfandel. It meant maybe a little bit of really fluorescent color, kind of on the paler side, but sweet. It meant there was sugar in it. And that's what I've always associated with blush, is something with a bit of sweetness. And when I started at the restaurant and had countless people ask me, oh, do you have a blush? I would say, at the time, we didn't carry a kind of sweeter style rosé. So they'd always say, oh, I don't have anything with any sweetness on it, and by the time I got to that far, they'd be like, no, I don't want sweet. Blush is like a really lightly colored, dry rosé.
Yeah. Maybe you're thinking like a gris, like rosé gris. You know the gris style. For me, blush, it means like light, very light, almost very, like pale, like super pale and sweet. So more like a wine Zinfandel style.
Yeah.
But what
I just thought they were interchangeable. White Zinfandel or Zinfandel blush. It was just whatever the producer decided they were going to call it. I don't know if there's there
might have been some confusion, because I think there was one of the bottles, it might be like Blossom Hill or one of these like massive ones that did actually have blush on it, and I think that was a sweet one. So there might have been like some confusion there. So like maybe people are just using the two terms, but like in parallel. I don't know.
Well, I've seen a lot of Pinot Grigio blush advertised. That seems to be on the drier side. But this actually made me really happy. You guys have just reinforced that I am not losing my mind, that blush does imply some sweetness. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what I'm here for, reinforcement of my own beliefs. And you guys tell me how smart I am.
It's always important.
Okay, right, I think we'll leave it there. I think we've kept you long enough. Thanks everyone again for watching. I've left loads of information underneath the video here. I've got links to all the wines that we're drinking. I've got the Google Earth map so you can have a look at all the vineyard and stuff. Got some articles and a good book if you really want to get into rosé wine.
Yeah, let's talk quickly about the book about the Master of Wine.
Okay, yeah, go for it. On you go.
No, go ahead.
Is it Elizabeth Gabay, and it's you put me on the spot. It's called Rose. Something about Pink Revolution.
Pink Revolution. Yeah, I mean, she's the
Understanding the
Master
Pink
of
Wine
Wine.
Revolution.
We're completely crazy about rosé wine. So yeah, I think it's an important thing
she's
to
got
read.
a blog as well that's like amazing. If you're like, if you want to get into rosé wine, like it looks like she's covering rosé wine in a way that no one else is. So really in depth.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks guys for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This has been great.
Thanks for having me. Thank you. Great to be here.
Okay, and we'll see you soon. Thanks again. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Cheers.
Okay, that's us.